So I'm here with recording artist and graphic artist Akbar. How you doing today?
I'm great, brother. Thanks for meeting with me and discussing hip hop.
Most definitely. I'm glad to have you. You're originally from New York, correct?
Yeah, originally born in the Bronx. Yeah, grew up in New York City.
Man,
for the most part.
That's the birthplace of hip hop. Like when I think of the Bronx, what was it like growing up in the Bronx?
It was quite an experience living in New York at a young age. I've grown up a lot of different places, so I can't just claim New York City as the place that raised me. But that's my place of birth, and that's where I came into my artistry. Was living in the Bronx. In my teens, my early teenage years. But I grew up in Chicago as well, and I've also spent some time on the West Coast living in LA, so I kind of got around throughout my childhood. But living in New York between 79 and 82 was really what impacted me the most as an artist. That's when I decided to get into the culture of hip-hop, because at that time it was really just an underground thing in New York City. So graffiti was my first endeavor. Like, that was the first thing that kind of drew me in. I was already very artistic at a young age. I was drawing, and I always admired artists. Like, I think some of my favorite artists were like Pablo Picasso, Norman Rockwell. Later on, like Basquiat, who was also a graffiti artist, Keith Haring. But my mom was an artist, so I had art around me. My dad was also very artistic, so I was always drawing. So when I got introduced to graffiti, it was just like instant fascination with the art, because it was everywhere in New York. It was on the trains, it was everywhere you went in the city. So immediately I started to pick up on graffiti art.
Wow, and I saw on your Facebook page, you posted some photos, the time period, and you were a b-boy.
Yeah. I mean, b-boying is really what we originally called ourselves. It wasn't really hip-hop. Hip-hop came later. Like, the term hip-hop was something that was coined later on. But when I was in New York, I was probably 12 or 13, we were b-boys. Like, that's what we called ourselves. And I think that the term comes from breaking. Like, breaks were what the DJs would play at the party, so they would play the break, the part of the record that was the instrumental, the solo part, where it was very rhythmic. And so the term breakdancing came from the breaks and the records. Like, those break beats were what the b-boys danced to. So we became known as b-boys, or breaking boys, or breaker boys, or beat girls. So I was really originally a b-boy. I was always into I was a b-boy. I was doing electric boogie, and I started breaking later on. Like, actually, when I came to Chicago in '82 is when I really started getting into breakdancing. But I was a b-boy, original b-boy. You know what I mean? The way we dressed, just the whole swag was just, it was very East Coast. So yeah, I was always still a b-boy. That's just a b-boy is really like a style and an attitude. You know what I mean? So yeah, b-boying is like the foundation of what hip hop came from.
And you have been a recording artist. You've actually had a record deal. How did you start making music and then eventually get a record deal?
Just being on the scene in Chicago. Like, I got the record deal later on. 94 was my first introduction to the industry. I didn't have a deal at that time, but I got linked up with a brother named Jamalski, who was down with BDP. And so Jamalski was doing reggae. He was a reggae artist, but he was chatting over hip-hop beats. He got down with Boogie Down Productions. And my DJ at the time, Parker, who was also a New York, Chicago resident, who I met, we basically formed a crew. He and I, when we met in Chicago, we formed a crew called Mental Giants. And so, being that he and I was like a group, I got introduced to Jamalski because him and Jamalski grew up in Manhattan. They grew up in the same neighborhood, so he knew Jamalski. So when Jamalski got down with BDP and kind of had like a buzz going on, I got introduced to Jamalski. I got on his album, and that was like Columbia Records, Sony Records at that time. This was like '94 when Nas was getting signed, the Fugees was getting signed. So I was like around all those people at the time when hip hop was like just like 90s was really like at a peak, you know, with the artists like Wu-Tang was coming out. A little bit later on they came out, but like at that time I was just kind of very new and just I was an MC, so I was just rapping, you know what I mean? So I got on Jamalski's album, and from that experience I decided I wanted to really continue and make it more of a serious you know, career move, because I was just rapping from when I was 13. So me and Park, we would just get together and make beats and tapes at the crib. But then as hip hop grew and it became more of a business, I decided, okay, let's take this serious and become a group. So we became Mental Giants. And from that experience, we just kept going with the music. I got on his album a song called Akbar's Groove, which was on Jamalski's album. His album was called Roughneck Reality. This was on Columbia Records. So his A&R, Jamalski's A&R, was the same A&R who signed Nas. She signed Mobb Deep. Her name is Faith Newman. So I met all these people, and it just kind of groomed me to what the industry was about, because I was just a rapper. I was just an MC, so I just wanted to rap. So I jumped on his album, did Akbar's Groove. It caught a little buzz. I came back to Chicago and just kept grinding, doing open mics and opening for other artists. And then eventually in '99, I caught the attention of some guys on the West Coast, and I got signed to a label called Ill Boogie Records. And that's when I came out with my first album, which was called Big Bang Boogie. That was in 2001 when the album was put out.
Man, what was the reception like, you know, of the album?
It was good. I mean, it was a well-acclaimed album. It didn't really break into the mainstream, and I think there were a lot of reasons behind why I didn't get the commercial success that I wanted. But it was a combination of, you know, this was just before 9/11, so like the economy kind of went downhill. My album came out in my album came out in June of 2001, and then a few months later, September 11th happened. But when my album came out, this is when people were still buying CDs, and I was doing in-stores at like Tower Records, Virgin Records. I would, you know, meet fans and like, you know, sign CDs and perform live and stuff like that. But the internet also changed the demographic, the landscape of the way music was consumed and the way music was shared. So I guess I got caught up in that transition, you know what I mean? So the album is, you know, it's considered an underground classic, and it was my first introduction as an artist, you know, my debut album. So you know, it's very dear to me, because it was like an experience and an opportunity for me to really like put all of my years of MCing into one project. So Big Bang Boogie was definitely like probably my most solid release.
Most definitely. And like, do you have any upcoming releases?
I do, but before, so Big Bang Boogie 2001, I kind of went back underground, was doing features and stuff with different artists, KRS-One, and who else? I did a lot of different features. AG from Showing AG. Wow, there's a lot, too many to mention probably, but I was just really just doing underground stuff at that time. This was like through the 2000s, 2002, 2003. I did a couple white labels with a guy named Third Rail. We put out some singles. And then in 2012, by the time 2012 rolled around, I had accumulated enough music to put out another album. So I put out a second album called Planet X. And that was my second album, 2011, 2012. And since then, I've just been working on doing new projects. Parker passed away, my DJ Parker. He passed away last year, so he and I were in the middle of recording another album, which would have been our first album as Mental Giants. Because when I did the Big Bang Boogie album, I had different producers. It wasn't just Parker. It was like a lot of different producers on the album. And Planet X was kind of the same thing. I had a lot of different producers, but he and I finally got back together and was working on a Mental Giants album where it would just be me and him, all Parker Lee production. But he passed away late last year, 2022.
Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. You know, it's tough losing people. You know, what was it like? You know, losing like somebody like, you know, who you were a frequent collaborator with.
It was like losing know, a big part of yourself, you know. So I'm still kind of dealing with the loss, but I feel that I'll take that energy and put it into my music, you know. So like right now I'm working on finishing what he and I started. You know, we were like halfway into an album, so I feel like it's just you know, part of my nature is to never stop, and I know Parker would want me to continue. So you know, I'm on the I guess the third leg of getting the album done, and soon, hopefully by the end of this year, I'll have the project done and have it out before the year is over.